Hello creatures, my name's Chloe. Today I'm going to be filming my March wrap-up. I'm not going to be putting it in the order of worst to best books like I was planning to because I read 34 books in the month of March and I don't have time for that. I know I'm in self-isolation, but going through 34 books, reordering them all, and writing down what I rated them, it's very time consuming. I'm currently doing NaNoWriMo and the Owls Magical Readathon. I'm not doing that. So we're just going to go through in the order of what I read and I'll tell you what I thought of each one. So the first 4 books I read in the month of March were all by the same author. So I read Tamara, Feast or Famine, Throne of Jade and Black Powder War. So Tamara is the first book in her overarching Tamara series. It's also known as His Majesty's Dragon. It's an alternative fantasy history. So it's the Napoleonic Wars, but what if we fought it with dragons? It's really, really good. I thoroughly enjoyed it. The first 2 books, so Tamara and Throne of Jade, I both rated 5 stars. Black Powder War, I rated 4 stars because, I don't know, it just didn't resonate with me the same way as the first 2 books did. I do think the first one is definitely the best of those books that I've read so far. Feast or Famine was a short story piece that I didn't give a rating to just because it's a little extra section, but it was still kind of fun. The next thing I read was Glyceride by Junji Ito. It was gross. I didn't rate it. It's fully disgusting. If you're into horror, manga, or graphic novels, I think you would like this. I did really enjoy the art style, but I don't do well with gross, and I'd heard it was gross. I had to read it, but I knew it would bother me. So I don't think I'll be reading any more Junji Ito, but I don't know, it was interesting to kind of dip my toe into more viscerally horrific stuff because I don't read a lot of horror or anything in that genre very often. So I did find it interesting and I like the art style, but I probably won't be returning to Junji Ito again unless I get a very, very, very convincing recommendation from somebody. The next book I read was book 4 in the Tamara series. This book is called Empire of Ivory. I rated this book 4 stars. So with the Tamara series, in the first Tamara book, Tamara the dragon is hatched and forms a partnership with Will Lawrence, who is our main character, and that really just follows them developing their relationship. Throne of Jade takes them to China. Then Black Powder War is them trekking from China through to Istanbul, and the books follow their journey across the world. So this book, they had to travel to Africa to get a cure for some sort of influenza that is affecting the ranks of dragons in Britain. Very topical given our current climate, I must say, but I read it before this was all happening. It was quite good. I gave this one 4 stars as well. It had some characters pop back up who I really enjoy who weren't in the previous book. So that was really nice. I thought that was fun. The next one I read was Dating You, Hating You by Christina Lauren. I loved this. It was great. I really love Christina Lauren's romances. I've been reading a lot of them. I must say though, it did show in this book that it was their first standalone romance they wrote. I didn't enjoy it as much as, say, Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating, which I adore. It just had some, I don't know, the writing wasn't as consistently brilliant as I've come to expect from them. It was more obvious with this book that it was their first standalone romance. I enjoyed it, but there wasn't actually enough romance stuff in it for me because it is a hook up to enemies to lovers narrative, and there was a little bit more enemies than lovers than I perhaps prefer in romance. I like cute, I like fluffy, I like a little bit of conflict, but more mushy, the actual relationship stuff. That's what I really like in romance, and this didn't have enough of that for me, which is why I rated it 3 stars. The next one I read was Victory of Eagles. This is the 5th Tamara book. There is no way for me to tell you what this is about without spoiling it. It's not actually possible. So I won't. The next book was Tongues of Serpents, also by Naomi Novik. This is the 6th Tamara book. This kind of took a downward turn in the series for me. This book and the last one in the series took a definite shift in tone because of some of the events that happen in it, and I just don't enjoy the tone they took as much. Now, for me, the interesting part about Tongues of Serpents is it's actually set in Australia. It's set from 1806 to 1815, the whole series. There's 9 books. So this was right in the centre of when transportation was a known punishment. Obviously, I'm Australian, so reading this book was very, very interesting. People have a certain picture in their minds of what Australia is like, and then Australians have a completely different one. So it was very interesting seeing a book set in Australia from someone who is not Australian. It's not something I come across all that often. I think she did an excellent job handling content concerning Aboriginal Australian communities and their culture. I'm not an Indigenous Australian, so I can't speak to the representation specifically, but it certainly was more delicate than a lot of handling that I've seen in Australian media. So there's that. I must say though, the plot of this book is consumed with trekking across the entire width of Australia. The country is massive. It's enormous. I don't think many people actually grasp how massive Australia is. It's huge and it's empty. Most of the centre of our country is virtually uninhabitable. Like, the whole centre of Australia is desert. It's red dirt, rocks, scrub, and nearly this whole book is just crossing it. There's very little interaction with other people. They are preyed on by bunyips, which I did really enjoy. They're not a fantasy creature you come across very often. They're a traditionally Indigenous creature that I don't know terribly much about, but I was very scared of them as a small child. I don't know the details. I know depictions of them shift across different areas of the country, but they're essentially monstrous beings who you shouldn't go too near. In this, bunyips are burrowing creatures who can redirect water, which they frequently do to our main characters. The thing is, crossing a desert for like 200 pages is quite boring. Like, I didn't love it. I liked it because we got to see a different environment for dragons and people to function in. I liked it because I don't see many books set in Australia, specifically not fantasy novels, that actually interact with those concepts of transportation and the convict era and Indigenous culture. That doesn't happen very often at all. So I really enjoyed it on those fronts, but as an overall installment in a series I really like, a bit lackluster, which is why I gave it 3 stars. The next one was another Christina Lauren. This was Roomies. I loved this so much. So it's a marriage of convenience. The main character is a young woman who has an enormous crush on a busker in her subway system. She doesn't have a whole lot going on in her life. Her uncle's got her a job in a theatre. She essentially works for them, and she doesn't have a whole lot else going on. She's attacked one night on the subway by a homeless man, and the busker comes to her rescue, but when she is being attended to by emergency services, he's vanished. It turns out one of the main orchestra in her uncle's production of this hit musical he has produced and written leaves, and she thinks the busker would be the perfect person to pair up with the new male lead of the show. Unfortunately, he's in America illegally, he's Irish, so they have a marriage of convenience, and it's great. 5 out of 5. So the next 4 are all short stories that I read. They were written by Ben Aronovich, who's the author of the Rivers of London series. They're sort of little shorts that fill in different segments of the Rivers of London world, which is of course why I read them, but they're very short, so I didn't give them any ratings. So I read Nightingale London, 1966, The Home Crowd, Tobias Meckenheim, 2012, Reynolds, Florence, Arizona, 2014. Didn't rate any of those. But then I also read The Furthest Station, which is a novella in the Rivers of London world that I did rate and thoroughly enjoyed. This is set between the 5th and 6th books in the series. I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was an interesting concept. I actually wouldn't have minded if it took up more space in the narrative. I feel it could have been a whole extra book, but because it diverts from the main storyline, I can see why it wasn't. But it was really good. Charmcaster by Sebastian de Castell. This is the 3rd book in his Spellslinger series. I love this book. It's YA coming-of-age fantasy. It's got great magic systems. I think this is why I like this series so much. It's got great world building, really consistent magic. The rules are set out fairly clearly. Like, you can tell there's rules to magic in this world, but the reader doesn't know all the rules, and neither does the main character. So we're continuing on with Kellen, our main character's story arc in this book, and he's growing up, he's finding himself, and this book in particular was very interesting as an instalment in his storyline, but I don't want to spoil anything. The next book was Prudence by Gail Carriger. This is the first book in the Custard Protocol series. This is a follow-up series to her Parasol Protectorate series. Don't read this series unless you've read Soulless. You can't, it doesn't make sense. It will not work if you haven't read the books prior. I loved it. It was 5 out of 5 stars. It focuses on the child of some of the main characters in the Soulless series. It was really, really good. I loved it. As much as I loved Soulless as a book series, I think I'm much closer in age to the characters of Prudence at the moment, and it really, their stories, I don't know, they rang a bit truer with me because I think of that age link. So it was actually really lovely to read this book. I adored it. 5 out of 5, obviously, but it was great. Come Tumbling Down by Sean Maguire. This is the 5th book in the Wayward Children series that I am a massive fan of. I was really excited to get my hands on this one, and it was so good. I loved it. If you don't know the Wayward Children series, it's set around a school for children who have gone through doorways into alternate worlds that fit who they are better than ours does, but they've been forced to return and try and make their way in our world. Miss Eleanor's School for Wayward Children offers a place for them to go where they won't be forced to realign with the real world or meet the expectations of parents who don't understand where they've been. And the series is structured so that books with odd numbers are the main storyline, and books with even numbers are the stories of children who feature in those other books. So, for instance, the 2nd book is the backstory of 2 characters who play a large role in the 1st, and so on. So, book 5 is a return to the main storyline, and a return to some of the characters I thoroughly enjoyed. We got to see more of the Moors that feature in the 2nd book in the series, because it tells the story of Jack and Jill, and it's a horror movie, and I loved it. It was so dark and a little bit grotesque and gritty, and it filled in a really, really nice spot in this story, I felt. I love these so much, and they're quite short. They're very easy to read. I find Sean and Maguire's style really comfortable to read and also very lyrical and beautiful, which is why I'm going to be reading Into the Drowning Deep as part of my Hours Magical Readathon challenge. I genuinely can't wait for the next book in this series. I'm really looking forward to it. So 5 out of 5, obviously. So the next 9 books are all Gail Carriger. I went on a little bit of a binge with Gail Carriger in February and March. I've now read her entire back catalogue of historical fiction. I will probably also read the rest of her books at some stage, but for now I'm going to give it a slight rest because it was a lot, and it was great, but it was a lot. I will also preface this by saying literally every single one of these 9 stories, 8 of them were 5 out of 5, and the last one I didn't give a rating to because it's a short story. I love these books. I'm thinking I will probably do a separate video just about this series because I love it so much and I want to talk about it more, but yeah, so I read Imprudence, Competence and Reticence. They are the 2nd through 4th books in the Custard Protocol series. The 2nd one focuses on Prudence, who's our main character from the 1st book, but the 3rd and 4th focus on her 2 best friends. The 3rd one is about Primrose Tunstall, who is Prudence's best friend, and the 4th one is about her brother Percy, and they both travel with Prudence on her dirigible. Not going to explain myself. The next one was The Curious Case of the Werewolf That Wasn't. This is a short story about the main character from Soulless's father. So this is Alessandro Tarabotti. Pretty much everything that happens in Soulless and in the Parasol Protectorate and the Custard Protocol happens because of Alessandro in some way, shape or form. He's very influential, and this is the only time we actually see him on page. He dies prior to the start of Soulless. It was really short, but a nice little vignette to fill in some of the questions you have about Alessandro. So the next 4 were Etiquette and Espionage, Curtsies and Conspiracies, Waistcoats and Weaponry, and then Manners and Mutiny. This is the Finishing School series. So it's set in the 1850s, which is 20 years prior to the Parasol Protectorate, and then the Custard Protocol is set 20 years after Soulless in the 1890s. This is actually a YA series, so this is appropriate for younger readers. It's very, very good. So our main character, Sophronia, is shipped off to a finishing school to polish up some not-so-neat behaviour. And it turns out she's going to a school for spies. Hijinks ensue. They're great. I really thoroughly enjoyed these. From a plot standpoint, I think these are definitely the strongest books, just because they are for a younger audience, so they're not as focused on the character aspects of her other series, which I still adore, but I found myself a lot more caught up in the actual mysteries that happen in each of these books and the events that occur. And then finally, I read Poison and Protect. This is a novella that goes along with the Finishing School series. It actually follows a girl who went to school with Sophronia, who wasn't exactly pleasant in the original series. So it's about Priscilla, Lady Valentia. She is an assassin. And she's a very good assassin. She's got 4 dead husbands and plenty of money, and she is bored, like real bored. So bored, she takes on an assignment to both protect a duke and to protect his daughter from a bit of a gold-digging man who's sort of following her about. While there, she meets Gavin Ruthven, who is a Scottish captain with the Coldstream Guards, and it's a romance novella. It's great. Please read it. It's so good, it's delightful, and it's funny. Like, these books are hilarious. I think that's why I like them so much. They're a comedy of manners as well as historical fiction, alternative history, fantasy. They're phenomenal books, and I'm really looking forward to it because another one of these novellas is being released in a couple of months, and you can bet I will be buying it immediately. I would highly recommend all her books. The next 3 books are also all by the same author. This is Christina Lauren this time. So I read Beautiful Bastard, Beautiful Bitch, and The Honey Don't List. So Beautiful Bastard is the first book that Christina Lauren ever published. I loved it so much. It is full-blown erotica, I must say. Like, be aware of that. If you don't like sex in books, do not read. Actually, I would probably say don't read any Christina Lauren standalones either, to be honest. They've all got sex scenes in them, which I think are actually very well executed, but if you don't like that sort of thing, don't read it. Beautiful Bitch is the novella that follows Beautiful Bastard, so it's set immediately after. I really enjoyed this one as well. And then The Honey Don't List is their most recent release. It actually only came out a few days before I read it, which I didn't realise, but I really enjoyed it. So it is one of their standalone romances. It was great. 2 assistants to a couple who are very famous in the craft, home, decor, real estate type area. They're on TV. They make stuff. And they're tasked with trying to keep their boss's marriage together after the husband is found to be cheating. The wife is intense, and they have to try and keep them together while they go on a book tour around America that is promoting their book on marriage. It's great. It's really cute. I actually really enjoyed the story of this one as well. This did have markedly less romance in it, I would say. Like, there's not very many sex scenes in it at all. I think there's 2, maybe 3, not entirely sure on that. But most of it was actually devoted to the characters and what they need and what is happening with the rest of the plot. So that was really cool. It was focused on cerebral romance, I would say. Really good, 5 out of 5 for all 3 of these books. The next book was Funny, You Don't Look Autistic, A Comedian's Guide to Life on the Spectrum by Michael McCreary. He's a Canadian comedian who I'd never heard of. I will definitely be checking his comedy out now, though. This book popped up on Libby as a recommended read, so I read it. It's quite short. I really enjoyed this book. It reads as what it is. It's a short memoir written by a 22-year-old, and if you don't go into it with grand expectations of a huge book with all the nuance of someone who's lived decades and decades on decades to reflect on, it's brilliant. I rated it 4 out of 5 stars. I would highly recommend it because it is an own voices memoir and it's well executed. Like, it's a really well-written book. The next book was also a memoir. It's by Kitty Flanagan, who's one of my favourite Australian comedians. It's called Bridge Burning and Other Hobbies. This book is very episodic and it sort of goes through her dating history more than anything else, but it's fantastic. If you're familiar with Kitty Flanagan, and if you're not, you should be, because she's amazing. It reads like one of her comedy sets, which is why I loved it so much. I have a hold on her next book on Libby. Bridge Burning and Other Hobbies was fantastic, and I rated it 5 out of 5 stars. Oh, thank goodness we're down to the last 2 books, and they're by the same author. The first one is Jacoby by William Ritter. Guys, why did no one tell me about this book? It's exactly what I want. It's Sherlock meets Holly Black / English mythology meets Stalking Jack the Ripper, kind of. and it's so good. I loved it so much. It was exactly what I wanted. The premise is a young girl who sort of absconded with her tuition money to go and dig up dinosaurs, comes to the shores of America seeking her fortune, and she stumbles into company with R.F. Jacoby, who is the world's only seer. What this means is he's the only person who can see creatures and magic without help. A murder mystery ensues. It has banshees, it has monsters, it has everything I like. It's so good. I'm got the second book on hold as well, and I'm really, really excited because I loved it so very much. It was so good. I'm definitely going to be finishing this series very, very soon. And the last book was The Map, which is a novella set after Jacoby. It's our main character's birthday, and Jacoby finds an adventure for her, and it's real cute and real great, and I loved it. So there you have it. Those were all the books I read in the month of March. It was a great reading month. Like, I think I only had 3 or 4 books that were less than 4 stars, and even then, I've thoroughly enjoyed them. I've been letting my mood direct where I'm reading a lot lately instead of trying to force myself, and it's been fantastic. So I'm still hitting up some historical fiction, and I'm sticking to like cute fluffy stuff at the moment. Now, an update on my reading challenge. I cannot remember how many books I was behind at the end of February. I think it was 10 or 12, and I'm very, very happy to say I closed that gap in the month of March. I'm so close to being on track again. It's brilliant. I'm so happy, because I really didn't think I'd be able to hit a goal of 300 books. But if I keep up this reading pace, I will do that well and truly. I'm only 5 books behind schedule. I've read 70 in 3 months, and I'm trying to read 300 by the end of the year. So I should be able to do that. Should be. All my social media links are down in the description box below. I'm currently doing Camp NaNoWriMo if you're interested in my writing content, and I'm also participating in the Ours Magical Readathon 2020 if you're interested in my bookish content. So check those videos out if you're interested. Subscribe if you want to, like it if you did, and I will see you soon in my next video.